Alright guys, today we are going to be practicing the air brakes test, and we're going to be using our primary gauge throughout this whole test. Make sure you let your instructor know when you're at the DMV that you are using your primary gauge throughout this whole test. Critical. Okay, so the first step is to perform a safe start, and when doing that we are going to turn on the electrical first before we turn on the engine. We wait till everything settles. So there goes the electrical. We're going to wait for the ABS light to turn on and off. And we're going to wait for all the needles to settle. Alright, once that has settled, we are going to turn on the engine. Make sure you are in neutral. Okay. So, test number 1 is your leakage test. And we cannot lose more than 4 psi in a minute. So, we're going to build up air pressure. We're going to hold it up to about 12 RPMs until our tanks are full. So about 12 RPM. We're looking at our primary gauge right now. We're going to fill up this tank. Alright, that sound right there is the indication that your tanks are full. So go ahead, release the accelerator. And now we're going to turn off the truck, but leave the electrical on. Now wait for all the needles to settle. And we're going to release your parking brake as well as your trailer brake. While the needles are settling, make sure you slide this into second gear. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. The leakage test is performed in second gear with the engine off. Okay, so once the needles have settled, we're going to apply the brake pedal, and we're going to hold it for 1 full minute. We cannot lose more than 4 psi in this test. If we do, it's a bad test. So I'm going to apply the brakes. So the needle stopped moving about 80 psi, and we're going to hold it for about a minute. If the needle drops more than 4 psi within this minute, it's a bad test. We're using our primary gauge. Alright, our PSI was at 80 PSI and did not drop more than 4 PSI in the minute. It's a good test. Test number 2 is your low air pressure warning test. And that comes on between 55 to 75 PSI. So we're going to apply the brakes gently and fast until we hear the warning light come on and the buzzer. Here we go. Okay, it came on about 60 PSI. Good test. Alrighty. Test number 3 is your spring pop-out test. And those pop out between 20 and 40 PSI. So, right after step 2, you do step 3. Drop the air pressure by pressing the brake hard and slow until the yellow and red knobs pop out. They're going to pop out between 20 and 40 PSI. There you go. They both popped out about 35 PSI. Good test. So we have 25 and 50. So we're right in between there. We're about 35 PSI, 38 PSI around there. Either way, it's a good test. Okay. Test number 4, the truck has to be on. So, make sure the truck is in neutral and go ahead and turn on the truck. So, for test 4, we are going to give it some gas. We're going to hold it about 12 RPMs, and then we are going to make sure that it will cut out before 140 PSI. So here we go. An extra tip for you: if you hear the tanks release air, then you know your tanks are full. Call out that PSI. It's a good test. So right now we're filling up the tanks. Remember, your cutout test, not more than 140 PSI. I'm up to about 12 RPMs right now. I'm filling up my tank slowly. It's gonna stop about right here. Alrighty. It cut out around 127 PSI. Good test. Go ahead and release the accelerator. Test number 5 is your cut-in test. And it's not going to cut in not less than 100 PSI. So we are going to apply the brakes one time and then apply the accelerator. Once the needle starts moving, call out that PSI. So here we go. Apply the brakes.